But frankly, there are a ton of bad habits, misconceptions, or hard lessons that you'll see reps face when they're picking up the phones. And by contrast, there are certain things that the best of the best performers do every single time, no matter what company you're looking at. If you're not booking meetings and you're not changing anything this week, you might as well write your resignation today. So I've got this kid right now who's on PIP, and he works for this team that I coach. And I could have told you 4 weeks ago this was probably going to be where it landed. And the reason for that is every single week, the kid would show up and he would open his cold calls with the exact same "did I catch you a bad time" opener and the exact same telemarketer pitch. And every single week, I'd be like, "Hey, it doesn't seem like this is working. Are you open to changing something?" He'd be like, "Sure." And I'd be like, "Great, let's try this new script." He would come in this next week and he would deliver the exact same thing over and over and over again. And so week after week after week, I was giving him the exact same feedback. And I would listen to these cold calls, and it was like I was having deja vu each week. And eventually I was like, "Dude, what do you want to change? It doesn't have to be my way. It doesn't have to be your way. But the definition of this way is a certain path to not hitting quota." And I know this sounds ridiculous, but I see this all the time with average reps where there's someone listening to this call right now who has booked one meeting a week, every single week for the last 6 weeks, and has not changed anything. And this happens all the time with average reps. Is if you're not succeeding, you can't cling to the script that's getting you one meeting per week, because there might be a script that can get you 3 or 4, but you will never actually know it unless you try to change one thing. So try to change one thing every single week until you get 2 meetings, and then keep what got you 2 meetings, and then try to get a 3rd meeting, and then try to get a 4th meeting. But if you stick to the exact same playbook that is clinging to the only meeting you're getting, you're only going to get 1 meeting per week.
One recommendation that I would have is, if you are cold calling, my guess is not every single call goes your way. And so if you have a call that doesn't go your way, you get shut down with "I'm not interested," and you don't know how to respond, or somebody hits you with like an objection about your product and you actually don't know like what you need to know to overcome that. I would just write that stuff down on like a post-it note while you are calling. And at the end of your week, at the end of your session, you'll see all of the areas where you got stuck. And then, to Armand's point, just pick one and work on that one thing in the next week. A lot of folks overestimate how much they can fix in a single week, but underestimate how much they can improve if they picked one thing a week and worked on that for a full year. Rude responses don't actually mean you're doing anything wrong. You can have the best opener, pitch, or even product in the world, but you're still going to get punched in the face on the phone, and that is frankly part of the game. All right, so the story behind this one is, this was actually back in 2018. I was fairly new to sales, Armand, and I was selling legal ERP systems to law firms in Southern California. And there was this one competitor of ours that was like a small family-run, sort of like regional provider. And I knew that the owner was going to be retiring and basically winding down the business, and that we had actually just won over their biggest client to migrate to our system. And it was like a big name, like AmLaw 100, big law firm. And I was like, okay, we've already gotten one. I've got like 12 others in my territory. Let me go run a campaign on all of the people using this legacy competitor. And so I go after them hard, basically using messaging, being like, "Hey, we're already migrating some folks over off of your system to ours. You want to talk?" And I hit these folks hard. And about 2 weeks after starting this campaign, I get put on an email chain where a prospect I had reached out to forwarded the email to their CEO of this competitor, who then forwarded it to our current customer that we had just won, who then sent it to our CRO. And it was chewing me out of like trying to steal their clients, and this is bad business practice, like chewing me out for, it was pretty innocuous prospecting. And I get the email and I'm like, oh boy. And then I hear my phone ring. And I look, and it's my CRO, Chris. And I'm like, there goes my job. I'm done. So I pick up the phone, and I'm like, hey, Chris. And he goes, Nick, listen, I wish our entire sales team was prospecting the way that you are. We are going to get messages like this. Just because someone is a jerk here doesn't mean you should change a thing. Maybe cool on some of these accounts for a bit, but keep being aggressive with your prospecting. And the lesson that I learned here, I really needed to hear that from him, because I was like, oh gosh, maybe I shouldn't have done this. Maybe I shouldn't have made the calls. But it actually reminds me of something Josh Braun says a lot. And he talks about, if you go for a walk in your neighborhood and you walk past your neighbor's yard, there will be a dog in your neighborhood that barks at you sometimes just because you were going for a walk. That doesn't stop you from going for an evening stroll with your wife to wind down at the end of the day. You don't stop walking just because somebody was rude here or there. And the reality of outbound is you can have the best product in the world, you can have a killer, relevant, researched pitch, you're still going to deal with rude people. That should not stop you from putting in the effort on outbound.
Yeah, there was one SDR that I used to coach, and she was cold calling into one of the big four accounting firms, PwC, worst firm in the world. And she reaches out to someone pretty high in the legal team. We were like a financial compliance software, and we literally get an email from the chief legal officer of PricewaterhouseCoopers claiming that she's going to reach out to our CEO. And I looked over her shoulder, and she was freaking out. She was like borderline in tears. She thought she was going to lose her job. And I was like, you changed absolutely nothing. And folks, for anyone listening, I guarantee if you're doing thoughtful outreach and you are working your accounts the hard way, your sales manager is going to be proud of you. And if he or she is not, you should go find another sales manager, because the vast majority of people are actually afraid to knock on the doors in the first place. Every single time you have a bad week on the phones, I'm going to ask you the same two questions. Number one, was it a volume, connect rate, or set rate issue? Number two, what can you do to fix it? Use metrics to identify the problem. Do not throw crap at the wall. So this is probably one of the most frustrating things when I see not great sales leaders coaching, is 99% of their answers are make more phone calls or change our cold call script. Contrary to my last tip, changing the cold call script is not always the answer. I'm not saying you should go be a dashboard manager and stare at metrics for 3,000 years and stay away from the sales floor, but you use metrics to tell you what problem you should solve, and then you go to the sales floor to solve the problem. So I was coaching one of the best SDRs I've ever coached. Her name is McKenna, and she booked, I think it was 5 meetings in a single week. And she was like coming in, and she has a growth mindset. She's like, here are the 7 things I wish I should have fixed in these cold calls that I didn't make happen. So I started looking at her numbers, and I'm like, McKenna, you set 30% of your connects. What would happen if you became a top quartile cold caller? She's like, I don't know. I said, you would set fewer meetings. I was like, we can talk about these 2 calls that slipped, but the reality is I listen to those calls. Those prospects aren't booking a meeting with anyone. Mm-hmm. And you might actually lose one of your meetings by changing the script that you have, which is clearly working. But let's look at your connect rate. Her connect rate was 2%. So McKenna, if you can get your connect rate from 2% to 5% and you don't change a single thing on your script, how many meetings do you book next week? She does the math. 5% versus 2%. That's a 2.5x difference. McKenna goes from booking 5 meetings to 12.5 meetings in a week just by fixing her connect rate issue. So if we wanted to solve the wrong problem, we could have role-played objections for the next 30 minutes. Instead, we spent the next 30 minutes brainstorming why McKenna's connect rate was only 2%, knowing that if she could even lift it from 2 to 3%, she would go from 4 to 6, or from 5 to 7, or from 7 to 12 meetings. And so you don't have to be a data scientist to use basic metrics like a connect rate and a set rate to know what part of your funnel you should fix, and then go and fix it.
I'll add one thing, Armand. We put together a bunch of baseline benchmark metrics for things like set rate, connect rate, etc. If you're curious about how your metrics stack up to other people, there's a link to go get that in the show notes. That should help you figure out what problems you need to fix.